This is Juana Capote from the New Westminster Museum and Archives. It is February 21st, 2014. I'm with Doug Kelly of the City of New Westminster here in Irving House. Thank you for joining me today, Doug.
You're welcome.
So you've worked for the city for 42 years?
42 years in May.
And was that in the position you're in now?
No, I've done a few positions. I started in the office in the water department up at the Public Works Yard. I spent the summer of '73 working in the parks as a laborer during the Canada Summer Games. Mm-hmm. From there I went to reading meters, which is what I'm doing now. I did that for 3 years, and then for 11 years I was the manager of the city market. People referred to it as the farmers market. Mm-hmm. And when the market closed, I was in City Hall as a clerk in the utility department for 6 years, and since 1992 I've been out reading electric and water meters.
Great. Where was the farmers market?
It was down where 1051 Columbia Street was the address, and it was there from 1947 till it closed in 1986.
And it was replaced by?
Well, the city sold the property. It's now Boston Pizza, the IGA, well, what was the IGA mall down there, that property there. There was a big building that housed the market and bingo. There used to be a Bank of Montreal out front, and there was two other little stores. When I was the manager there, all of them were vacant. The bank had just moved out sometime in early 76 or 75. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you said that you also lived in New Westminster?
I grew up in New Westminster. When I got married in 1975, I moved out of the city. Mm-hmm.
So what years did you work at the farmers market?
From 1976 to 1986.
So how did you come to have that job?
Well, it was a civic employee job. It was, in fact, going back to when this market opened in 1947, on the city list of jobs, they listed the mayor, the council, the administrator. Mm-hmm. The market manager used to be listed on it. Not when I had the job, but prior to it. I had a brochure from the opening in 1947, mm-hmm. and it listed, all the supervisors in the city. So, but it is a city job. I applied for it, and when the other guy retired, and was a successful candidate. So, mm-hmm. The market ran 2 days a week, Friday, Saturday, and there was bingo 6 nights a week, and there was a restaurant that the city took over. It used to be leased out. The city took it over and ran it as a cafe during the market and as a concession for the bingos. Mm-hmm.
What was the name of the restaurant?
Prior, it was the trying to think what it was. Capri, I think, restaurant. I believe. I could be wrong, but the Copper Kettle group that used to run some buffet restaurants in the Lower Mainland were the owners, and they ran the catering out of it and ran the cafe open only on Friday and Saturday during the market. Mm-hmm. And then they did the concession for the bingos at night too, till the city took it over.
Right.
Yeah.
When did the city take it over?
I'm guessing 78, 79, somewhere around there.
So that was around the time when you were working?
Well, I'd been there for a couple of years when the city took it over. Yeah.
What did they serve?
When I was there, it was just basic. They had a grill, so they did breakfast for the market. They did sandwiches for the bingo, the popcorn, candies, cigarettes. Back in those days were sold. So it was a small. There was more options when the cafe was there before the city took it over. Mm-hmm. But it was it was coffee, tea, stuff like that. It was donuts, mm-hmm. And it was servicing the market and then the bingos. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
And in the market, what kind of shops were in there?
Well, in the market, they were tables that were rearranged from bingo to the market that were set up as there was produce, and there were some different stalls other than tables for the produce. There was refrigerated units. There was a meat market in there. There was a fish stand, and there were plants. During the spring, there was a lot of bedding plants. 3 or 4 people, different groups would come in with bedding plants and sell them. There was doll clothes. There were lots of women made doll clothes, doilies, other kitchen stuff and household things that they made were sold at the market. There were toys, wooden toys. There was clocks, burl clocks, ceramics when they were in macrame, when it was in, and other various crafts and stuff that were there were some dresses too. But all the crafts, all the products had to be handmade. They could not be bought. They had to be made to sell at the market. And we had some farmers that came in from. We had one fellow who had a dairy farm out in Mission, and he'd come in only on Friday and sell the stuff that he grew on his farm. I think that basically general scope of what was sold at the market. Back in the days before, the history of what the market, when it actually started, because it started back in 1893, I believe, on the building on the waterfront. And from there, it burnt down in the Great Fire. And from there, they built it at the present Army Navy site. They built a new market that was on Front Street, but directly behind where the Army Navy is now. A new market there, and then they moved from there to the Army Navy site was the city market before it moved to 1051 Columbia. Those are the sites that there's been, but it always has been, to my knowledge, been run by the city of New West or provided for it up until the time that they sold the property, and so.
With I had a question about the handmade crafts. How did you verify that they were handmade?
We told people that when they came in. If there was a question, they'd come to me, and I'd talk to the person. I could go to see where they were producing it. Most people, if it wasn't handmade and you talk to them about it, they'd either remove it or they wouldn't come back. So it was a set of guideline rules, I guess, that are there that were abided by. Yeah. So now, prior to that, like when we were there, it was a local meat market that was the butcher. Their produce was the main produce stand wasn't a farmer. It was somebody who bought produce from the wholesaler and sold it at the market, and maybe they sold it somewhere else on other days. But it wasn't a farmer, but there was the odd farmer came in during season. The butcher shop prior to, back in the 40s and 50s, actually used to have live chickens, ducks, and everything coming into the market. So it was the market used to just be open on Fridays, and that was the market day. They used to come when the BC Electric, all the way from Chilliwack, come in. People used to come in with their produce and to visit the market on Fridays. Prior to the bridges and the BC Electric, they used to come by boat. The ferries that were on the market, and people would come in with their, I've been told in articles I've read, cows and chickens and that, to market just for the Friday, and then they'd pack up and go home. It was, they extended it to Saturdays sometime, I guess 1950s or 60s or something, and it was a 2-day event. So it was.
Of course.
Yeah. You have any other questions regarding?
Yeah. So people came in the past. You said on the BC Electric Railway with their produce as well as their
That's what I
animal?
understand, yeah. Well, I don't know about their animals, but with product. And customers came in on it from, the line used to go out to Chilliwack. It was similar to SkyTrain, which they decided to do away with. That's another story. But prior to that, it was a big day for the Lower Mainland, not just New Westminster, because people would come from Surrey, Langley, Chilliwack with their, and I don't know what time they'd get up in the morning because I wasn't around back in those days.
Of course.
But the articles that I've read, it was a big day for the people to come to the market and for the city of New West. It was New Westminster. It was a big event back in those days.
And when you were managing the market, were most people coming by car?
Yeah, most people were coming by car, and it was. We had one lady that was in her 80s that came from Vancouver by bus. Mm-hmm. She only came in on Fridays. She was in her 80s, and she did crochet and other sewing crafts and things that. And some of the vendors used it. They made some money, but they also used it as a social event where they talk and get to visit people, and so it was a big day for a lot of people in the day back. I guess even up into the 80s for some people, but it was there were some people that made a decent living out of it, and now you can see the new farmers markets they have in different cities around here on different days. They seem to be fairly successful. So,
do you remember the names of any of the vendors at that time?
Yeah, the head of the Market Vendors Association for the most time I was there was a lady named Vivian Sinclair. She's passed away. Dorothy Sinkbell was the lady that was in her late 80s or early 90s. Bertha Chapdelaine was a local New Westminster woman. McNaughton's Meats, who used to be down on, I believe, 408 or 410 Columbia Street, were the butchers that came in. Now, their last name wasn't McNaughton's; they bought the business. Used to be right next door to them at their store was Danish Bakery. That's another local store that used to come to the markets on Friday and Saturday. Some other names. I can think of the Fishman. The last Fishman we had was Ted. I can't remember his last name, but the one that wasn't selling fish when I started, but he was doing sharpening knives, and he was selling fish netting and stuff like that. He used to be at the market back in the 40s and that, and he had a fish business that he actually sold to people in New West. Was Ed Hoffman, and he was quite the character. He was 96, I believe, when he died. He was locally from New Westminster, and he had a business where he sold fish in New Westminster. And I don't know whether he was a fisherman, but he was he's quite an interesting character.
I think we have his fish scale in the museum collection. We got it last year.
It could be. Yeah, he was. His daughter's name's Marion Gobill, I believe. She didn't sell at the market, but she did come down quite frequently. And there was also a room in the market where we rented it out to local charities that had a rummage sale where they'd sell used clothing and other used items that were donated, and that was held on a Friday. So it was another thing that was going on. It was at times it was quite busy. People would line up to get up, and it was a single staircase and a small room upstairs, something a little bigger than this, but yeah. But Ed Hoffman was an interesting person. I'm trying to think of Pauline Moon was another one. Frances Lucier. She used to sell doll clothes and doilies and that. But when I came to the market, she was just basically selling coffee, tea, and she'd make toasts for. She had a little table and a little sink that she make toast and that for anybody that wanted to buy it from her. Ginger and Mike Leswick were produce people. There was Continental Sausage was another company that came in on Fridays. I believe they're still around not in New West, but in the Metro Vancouver area. Maple Farms was a small sausage company out in Aldergrove that they came in, made sausage, and they came in and sold it on Saturdays. Trying to think of some other names that were Betty Worth and her mother-in-law Eva Worth. Hopkins Nursery. They were in Richmond, and they came in year round. They took gaps when their produce wasn't there, or like they sold bedding plants, and at Christmas time they did up holly wreaths and very, very nice wreaths, and they sold those. So they were another group that came in. Jenish was a lady that had it was actually Jenish Homes. Her husband was Jenish Homes. They had bought property, a nursery down on King George Highway. She came in and sold house plants and bedding plants and stuff like that. I can picture some people, but I can't.
That's okay.
But those are a few more names. If I think of any more, if you'd want, I could drop you off a list or something.
Oh, sure.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And how many vendors were there in total?
I'd say there was probably somewhere between 50 and 70 at different times of the year.
Mm-hmm.
The Christmas time was the busiest time, November through till Christmas. After Christmas, it slowed down quite a bit, customer-wise and vendor-wise. The spring was another busy period with the bedding plants and that, where a lot of people would come in for their bedding plants, and then it would slow down through the summer a bit, where there might have only been 30 to 40 vendors coming in. Yeah.
And how did you choose the vendors? Was there a process?
Well, they applied, or I'd go out to some craft fairs or a flea market out in Cloverdale that was there looking for people that were interested in that. Bill Wardle was another one. He sold Burl clocks and did clock repairs and pen sets made out of wood. And I met him through the Cloverdale flea market, and he decided to come in. He was there for quite a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Millie Jansen was another one. Mr. and Mrs. Wood. I forget their first name. They were another vendor. Yeah.
So when did the rummage sale start?
Well, they'd come in. They'd set up stuff on Thursday afternoon, and then it would start usually 8 o'clock on Friday and go through till noon, something like that. And it wasn't every Friday, but they could book it. And I think it was a nominal charge for the room was $10 or $15 or something. They charged for the room, and it was you'd have the church bazaars and stuff like that they'd be selling their stuff there. Yeah. Yeah. So that's. But are you interested in what the bingos?
Sure.
Okay. There were 6 different groups of bingo. The Legion had 3 different licenses. Ladies Auxiliary, the Legion branch, and I forget what the other one was. They had bingo 3 nights a week. The Hayek Festival had one night, but they didn't have it under the Hayek name. They had it under the agriculture name that they had also on their rights to. The Alano Club, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, had a bingo one night, and the Rotary Club had a bingo.
Was the bingo quite popular?
The Alano Club was pretty good. the Sunday night one was for a while till all of a sudden bingo grew quite popular, and there were all the different Catholic schools or churches had them, and there was a big one that opened up in the old Army Navy building in the I'm guessing early '80s, and so you had you had competition, so it did peter out. And then the strike of '81, I believe, the bingos closed down during the strike for 3 months, and they never did fully recover from the strike. You know, people went to other bingos, and some of them came back, but some of them didn't. So it was sort of the end to once the bingos petered out and they were leaving to go to other buildings. The city at that time chose, because it was costing the city money. Now, the market actually used to break even or make money for the city. They decided to close it and sell the property. I think they had an offer for the property. I'm not positive, but so that's what happened. The demise of the market. So,
What was the strike of '81?
the city civic employees. They were on strike for 3 months. I think it was February, March, and April, or part of January. And because it's a civic building and there were civic employees other than me, I was management, so I worked through the strike. But the other employees couldn't. And the bingos chose not to cross picket lines. So, whereas the market did stay open. It did hurt the business to some degree, but yeah.
So what was an average day for you like over there?
Well, Tuesday to Thursday, it was, I'd be working 8 o'clock to 4:30. I'd do up the cash from the night before from the concession. We had the truck scale there too for the first 6-7 years that I was there, till it wasn't in very good shape, and the city decided to close it. But we had trucks coming across to get weighed that we charged for, to see if they were doing it to see if they were legal, so they wouldn't get fined. And there was that, buying supplies, contacting potential vendors, and then on Friday, Saturday, I started at 5:30 on Fridays, because the market opened at 6 in the morning and went till 2 o'clock. And then on Saturdays it went from 7 o'clock till noon. So I'd start at 6:30 on Saturdays and go through till 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so. Yeah. And during the markets, I'd collect money, answer any questions, assign tables to some people, and the regulars had their own tables that they had on a week-to-week basis. So they just went back to their own tables. Anybody new coming in, I assigned tables and collected funds.
So how much did the tables cost?
I'm guessing now. It was, I think the first 8 weeks it was something like $650 for an 8-foot table, and after you'd been there 8 consecutive weeks, it did drop down to $450 or something like that. Where you, if you're a regular, you got a discount once you were there, but you had to pay for it every week to maintain your discount. And there was a 10% saving if you paid for it on a 6-month basis. We had quite a few vendors did do a 6-month lease, and but there were I'd say at least half of them paid on a weekly basis. Yeah. So those were my days. I did the banking for the market, but yeah. There any other questions related to the market?
Yeah. What was the reaction when it closed?
Well, the vendors were upset, and so were the regulars. There were regular people that came down every Friday. We had Les Wetstein. He was another one. He had a Brownie House Bakery from out in Surrey. He came in every Friday. People came down just for his baked products, because they were baked at his bakery out in Fraser Highway. You had regulars coming down for their meat, their sausage, their there was, people were upset that a lot of people that were coming down, it was their annual weekly event. They'd go to the market every Friday. So there was, there's some people that were upset about this would change what they did. The vendors, I know some that I'd say maybe 10 to 20 vendors went out to a market that opened out in Port Moody for a while. Others continued to go to swap meets and other craft fairs. But, I think we got together once a year after the market closed, the vendors that we went out for dinner one night.
So you kept that up for a few years?
No, we just did it the 1 year. And then a lot of these vendors that went to the dinner and that they were seniors back then. They're my age. I'm turning 60 next week. They were 60 plus, right? They were in their 60s, early 70s. So it was, a few of them have passed away. But it was it was a trying time for most. And I actually left the market on a day-to-day basis in 92 before it closed, 3-4 months before it closed, because I got the position up at City Hall that they had to move me up there, but I was allowed to attend the market on Friday and Saturday. And there was staff still there, civic employees, that did the cleanup and stuff like that. And if there's any questions, they'd call me up at City Hall. And, but that was the basis of my work at the market. You have any other questions related to the market? Because I do know some other things about the downtown, that places that used to be there.
Let's talk about those then.
Okay, well, the present Army and Navy, that used to be Eaton's back until 1975, I believe. Eaton's closed, or 76. Eaton's store moved out of New Westminster. The Army Navy moved in shortly after. They used to be at the 668 Columbia Street, which is now being turned into a high-rise. That my mother actually worked at the old one at 668 Columbia Street in the fishing and sporting goods department. Do you want me to list some of the other stores that were down and since gone? Or okay, there was Regal Clothiers that was beside it. The hotel, the Windjammer, when it closed, prior to being the Windjammer, actually was Pier 660, I think, was the final hotel that was on the site there. Before that, it was the Windjammer. Before that, for a long time, it was called the Best Hotel. And I remember that from when I was a kid. I used to go to the Paramount Theater, which is now the Paramount Men's Club. But it used to be a Paramount Theater where they showed movies and that. And there was Tobin's Shoes. They were on Columbia Street. I'm trying to think some of the other. Sweet 16 is where the British store used to be, across the street. My sister used to work at Kresge's. It's the same company as Kmart when they were around up here in Canada. It's where the high rise across from, on the odd side of the street, was it 671, something like that, Columbia Street. It burnt down in a fire in, I'm guessing, the 80s. But there was Kresge's. My sister worked there as a waitress, and they had a cafe. There's the Metropolitan store, which is where I believe it's called Bigfoot now, and the Union Gospel Mission building is. They were in there. They had a fire in the late 60s, burnt down the building, and they rebuilt it as the Metropolitan. There was Woolworths. It's 630, I believe, in that block there. There's a Woolworths store. And at Christmas time, as the kid, I remember going down and buying Christmas presents for my mother and my dad and stuff. It was we used to have lots of lights, Christmas lights hanging over, which you're talking about putting back up now again. What else was down there? I don't remember the BC Electric building as the building where the trolleys came in and out of, but I do remember it as it was turned into at one time a Wass department store, which was a big company here. Ben Wass had stores throughout the Lower Mainland. That was what was there when I was a kid that I remember, and it's now the Salvation Army building there. There was the Windsor Hotel. Was it the Windsor that was on the on Begbie there that was torn down and rebuilt? Yeah. There was a hotel called the Dunsmuir, which is where the SkyTrain station is now. Prior to the SkyTrain going through, a few years before that, there was a fire that closed it up. What else was down there? My first job was as a pin setter at Olympic Bowling Alley.
Where was that?
It's where the SkyTrain is at Columbia underneath. Building is still there. They built up above it and around it. There was a building above it, and they renovated it. You wouldn't recognize it now, but there were 10 lanes that people set the pins. They didn't have a machine at that point. I was 12 years old when I started there. And the building is still there because I've gone down there.
Yes.
When I read the SkyTrain, I have been down to where the building is. The lanes are gone, but the building's sitting, and you can see where it was laid out. It was below Columbia Street on, I believe it's 430 Columbia Street was the address.
So what's there now?
Well, the Columbia Station is in behind it. Mac's convenience store is out front. There was a pizza place, but it's now I think they're using it as office space. Beside it used to be Wright's furniture.
Mm-hmm.
They had a furniture place. He was on that side of the street, and he was also actually it's 431 Columbia, I think, the bowling alley, because it's on the odd side. Across the street, 430, which is now there's a yoga place, and then underneath it is the massage. No, not the massage. The steam bath.
Mm-hmm.
Was also Wright's Furniture. They were there. He owned quite a bit of property.
And that's
at 430. That's at 430 Columbia Street. Was there.
With Olympic Bowling Alley, what were the estimated dates that they were open?
Well, it was opened. When did it close? I'm guessing that it probably closed somewhere in the 70s, but I'm guessing. And it had been open, I don't know when before that, but when I was a kid, my brother and I set pins there for, I worked there till I was, I guess, 3 years or so. I worked there. I also worked on the counter up front. And it was a small bowling alley in those days. There was actually a couple other bowling alleys in New West too. One still existing, Lucky Strike. There used to be one down in Sapperton on East Columbia that was 8 lanes, and it's gone. It's where, I don't know what's there now. Benny's Market took it over way back when, and I'm not sure what's in there now. But there also used to be one up where the 7th Street, just across from Royal City Centre. It's British pub now. It just changed hands. It used to be Moonrakers.
Mm-hmm.
That used to be a bowling alley. I'd never been in that, but I remember it. It was only lasted maybe 5-10 years. But there's another one on Agnes Street where Douglas College is. I never saw it as a bowling alley, but I remember waiting to pick up my mom one night, or a few nights, and we were parked out there. It had burnt down in the fire,
Mm-hmm.
and you could see the numbers where the lanes were.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a few bowling alleys. This one was underground. You went down, and you could bowl 5 or 10 pin. It was most of the leagues were 5-pin league. All of them were 5-pin leagues, but open bowling they did have 10-pin bowling also.
How much did they pay you?
You get paid 5 cents a game.
Okay.
So during league bowling, there was 10 people on your 2 lanes that you set, so you'd get 50 cents a game. They bowled 3 games. You got $1.50 for about two hours work. So you get paid by the game. When it was open bowling, you only get paid if people came in. If they didn't, then we'd bowl or something, and we didn't have to pay because we'd set our own pins, stuff like that. But yeah, it was one of the things. And from there, when I left there, I actually worked at Lucky Straight Lanes on the front desk and doing some. When there's a problem with the pins that got messed up or the machine got jammed, you go down and fix it and stuff like that. But yeah, the Olympic Lanes was my first job, and like I said, I did it from about 12 till I was 15. Yeah.
And Lucky Strike, that's the one on 12th Street.
That's the one on 12th and 6th, yes. Yeah. So I worked there for 2 years, I guess, and while I was going to school, and then from there I started working for the city.
So Doug, your sister, she worked at
Kresge's.
Kresge's, and that was a restaurant on
No,
Columbus?
it was like Kmart, only it was before Kmart came along. It was the SS Kresge Company, and Kmart was a branch of it when it down the road, right? But Kresge's was a you probably don't remember smaller stores. I'm trying to think what it would be like. Sort of like Winners, only a little smaller. And most of them had coffee shops in them too, right? You'd have some less expensive items. You wouldn't have fridges and stoves. You'd have some clothing. You'd have other knickknacks, salt and pepper shakers, some less expensive jewelry, stuff like that. And there were 3 or 4 of those stores along Columbia Street. On the high side of the street, there was Kresge's, Woolworths, and Metropolitan, and there was another one I can't remember the name. And at least 2 or 3 of them had like a coffee shop where you had a counter and you had stools and yeah. So it was. There's also a Zellers at one time in New Westminster. I don't know whether you were aware of that. Bottom, you know where Starbucks is, across the street on the corner. I believe it's 600 Columbia. There was a Zellers, and it was a 2 or 3 story Zellers store at that time. They moved out, I can tell you when, because my youngest son got lost. It was around the Clifford Olson time. He was 2 or 3. We were in there shopping with my wife and me and my older son, and he was there one minute and turned around, he was gone the next. He walked out the front door. He wasn't looking up. He followed somebody in the same color pants as me, and they took him up to the police station. There was a young couple in their teens. So it was in the 1981. It would be around that time that Zellers moved out of New Westminster. So there have been a number of department stores down on Columbia Street that have come and gone, and London Drugs was another one. They used to be down on Columbia Street where the new building's going, the new community center.
Yes.
Yeah, the Anvil Center. Yeah, so there was a London Drugs in there for a while. And when I was a kid, I don't remember the name of it, but I remember when we used to go down shopping. I used to live at Colburn Street between 8th Avenue, 7th Avenue, just off McBride. We used to go down by bus, my mom and my one brother and 2 sisters, and it was a big deal. And there was a store where we got a donut and whatever it was to drink, but they also had, and I believe it was where the Anvil Center was. There, you could get meat, you could get produce and stuff like that there at the store. So there, like I said, the 700 block of Columbia Street. There have been a number of businesses that have. That was back in the days of Columbia Street was referred to as the Golden Mile.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I don't remember all the names and specific buildings, but I do remember little things here and there related to it.
And what was the Sweet 16 store?
It was sort of like a Ricky's. You know, they had clothing, women's clothing and girls' clothing. There were, seems to me, Down beside where the old Army Navy used to be, there's a shoe store at Tobin's, I believe, or something like that. That was there. The Royal Bank used to be down there, you know that. Massage school's there now. Trying to think what else was down there. Have you got any more questions for me? If I think of anything off
Of course.
top of my head, I'll.
Yeah, well, I have a few questions specifically about the waterfront. What changes have happened to there and along Columbia Street? Because we were considering
Okay, well,
part of Columbia.
yeah, King Neptune Cafe. I don't know whether you've ever heard of the King Neptune.
Yes.
Used to be a high-end seafood restaurant. It was actually on a barge, but tied up, and you could access it. I believe it was 8th Street. Used to go
Yes.
through. Now it's Hyatt Center. 8th Street used to go through, and there was. If it wasn't there, it was Begbie, but I believe it was 8th Street. It was tied up there for years and years, and there's a lease dispute, and the city, they didn't close them, but they weren't willing to renew their lease there. Behind them and along the waterfront, there was actually Pacific Coast Terminals. You've heard of, somebody's talking, yeah. My dad actually, for, I don't know, a couple of years, I guess it would be in the 60s or 70s, was actually did janitor work at the Pacific Coast Terminals. So, and I can't remember any ships ever being docked there. I'm sure I saw some, but that was another big facility that was along the New Westminster waterfront. And it was an ongoing thing, you know, big deal back in those days. They had gates where you couldn't get in, and you had to be let in and out. What was up this way? The Woodlands, yeah, that was along the, well, you could overlook the river. Pacific Coast, there were other, there was at one time for a few years what they called the Fraser River Market. Have you heard about that? Well, I'm guessing it was in early 80s, late 70s. It was in an old building on the wharf, because the wharf was the flooring and you could actually see the river when you look down at places. It was quite cold during the winter, but it was a similar type of market to what they tried to get to what the farmers market was, but they also had other things that were bought and manufactured where they were selling. And it was prior to the opening of current Key Market, or as it's called now, what is it? Is it called
River Market.
River Market, yeah. So it only lasted for a year or two, but it was in an old warehouse building that was, like I said, the flooring was the actual dock, and you could see the river flowing through underneath it in places. There was the Royal City Cannery, which was down, I believe, the other side of the railroad bridge. I never worked there, but did my mother-in-law work there? She might have. But there were a lot of high school students, a couple guys I knew that had worked summer at the Royal City Cannery. And it was there, I guess, for decades before. Well, I'm not sure when it closed up. It must have been the 70s or early 70s, something like that. Yeah. So access to the river wasn't that great back as I was growing up, that I remember. Downtown, anyhow. It was a fire at the mill. You've heard about that back in 67, 66, something like that.
That was the fire.
Rainier
Yes.
Mill, yeah. And the big wooden water bombers, they were here. They were flying over, dropping water on it. I remember seeing the fire from the Queensboro Bridge. It was quite the going concern at the time. Yeah.
What do you mean it was the going concern?
Well, they were worried about it coming up the hill.
Yes.
They were ready to evacuate places. There used to be a gas station on 5th Avenue and 12th Street. From there below, they were having people leave their residences because they were concerned about how how far the fire was going to go, because it was like it was all kindling in the, you know, the 2x4s, stuff like that. It was all dried out. If it caught fire, it was, you know, it was going to go pretty good. And yeah, so it was going concern at that time how, you know, how far it was going to go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Were there a lot of people on the Queensboro Bridge watching the fire?
I was only 11 or 12 or something like that when, so I just remember my dad. I saw the bomber overhead on 7th Avenue, the 600 block, when we were going to pick up my mom. I remember seeing the bomber. It was just up don't think there were apartments, might have been there then, but I remember seeing it was quite low. And then we drove over to see the fire, and that was, you know, I don't remember much else about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, Doug, what do you think about the changes on the waterfront? Huh?
Well, it's like Columbia Street. They're trying to revitalize it, right?
Mhm.
And from what was there once the Pacific Coast terminals left, and that it has been revitalized to and upgraded quite a bit since the old days, and it had stagnated, and nothing was being done. So, with building all these high rises, that it has brought some life back to the area, and hopefully it's for, you know, it's for the better, and the communities are you know, it is that bringing people into the city of New West,
Mhm.
living, shopping. So it's